Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Today I have a special guest for you guys. He's a good friend of mine. We've met a few times, we've spoken. He's a highly intelligent guy. He is a local resident and he is an activist. He's just overall a great, great, great guy. So I'm not gonna hold you up anymore. Before we do anything, hit the like button, hit the share button, subscribe to the channel, and stay put. Let me bring him in. Paul, my friend.
Hey, how are you doing?
How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well.
Everything good?
Everything's excellent, actually.
Awesome. Thanks for accepting my invitation.
Oh, my pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on the show. For those people who don't know Paul is an activist. He actively is trying to get CRT out of the schools. He's actively trying. He talks about racism. He talks about CRT. He educates people, and let me not ruin his name. Let him explain to you what he does. Paul, please take the stage.
So I'm the founder of the National Society for the Advancement of Black Americans. That group, it's a nonprofit that focuses primarily on what we call poverty clusters, urban poverty clusters. Now, they're usually majority African American, but there's usually heavy population of Latino and Hispanic, and there's also, a pretty significant white population, 20-30%.
Yes.
The reason why I say poverty clusters is because it tends that where poverty comes together in urban centers, it affects all races.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what we approached. I ended up getting into the CRT battle because the CRT ideology was proving itself to be extremely harmful to particularly young men at risk. And I'll give you an example. I used to take every seventh year off to take a sabbatical to volunteer in the worst, most violent minority-majority school system I could find. So I was in Gary, Indiana, when it was the murder capital of the country. I worked in South Chicago. I worked in Mattapan in Massachusetts. I worked in Roxbury in the day when a taxi cab driver wouldn't even take you to Roxbury.
Wow.
For fear of being robbed. And the number one recruiting message of every single one of those gangs across the country was, America is systemically racist. Therefore, why bother to finish school? Because you're not getting anywhere anyway. So the message of CRT has been the strongest, most consistent message for gang recruiting across the country.
Nobody thought about that.
Yeah.
I honestly, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it has been. And so as it began to pick up, honestly, it infuriated me, because now an ideology that Black parents in poor neighborhoods have fought for decades was becoming mainstreamed. And in becoming mainstreamed, think about this. You're a young guy. You're 13, 14, 15 years old, and you're taught that the entire country is against you, and that the racism is so systemic that white people do it unconsciously.
Yeah. Unconscious bias.
Right. So if that's the case, why would you bother to apply yourself academically when you know the odds are against it? Then on the other hand, you have, young gangbangers saying, don't worry about that stuff. You're going to get paid. This is how you have to do it. That system is not your system. So step away from it and don't worry about it. And it works. It's a highly effective, the core, the primary core behind critical race theory is nothing new. It was a common belief in my family when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, my entire life. When I was younger, I was raised in majority Black neighborhoods. And then at the end of grade school, we moved. It's getting even in a minority neighborhood, you get 50 black people together and have a conversation, most of them is going to tell you that this systemic racism is affecting their life.
So where did you grow up?
Gosh, I was born in St. Louis, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved out to East St. Louis, Illinois, when it was the murder capital of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved to Mount Vernon, Illinois. I moved all over the place. And ended up in Alabama for a while. Ended up back in Illinois. And then my father, he's a pastor. We moved a lot because he was being moved between churches.
Yeah.
And when we got to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, he died of cancer. And so I ended up going through middle school and high school in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And then moved to Massachusetts for college. And then after that, military, which was what initially brought me to Virginia.
Yeah.
And then I've been here since.
So somebody sent me this the other day through Twitter. It says equity, anti-racism, school transformation action planning, school improvement plan, goal number 1, equity, anti-racism, then courageous conversation, examining presence and role, whiteness, then critical race theory, then school transformation action plan, equity and anti-racism, goal number 1. This is their transition into CRT, basically.
What school system is this?
This is Pennsylvania, actually. This
wow.
This is from Pennsylvania. I also got another tweet. Let me see what the. So he sent me. Says, what does it mean to be white? From Pacific Education Group's blatantly racist teacher training at Tredyffrin Easttown School District in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can understand why people who view themselves as empathetic to the plight of others would believe certain parts of critical race theory or parts of those theories resonate with them, because the narrative of our society tells us something that is not fundamentally true. I've said it many times, but I'm going to say it again for your audience. If in order for CRT to be true, in other words, in order for America to be systemically racist, that means that we should have a measurable way to measure the outcome, right? So if America's racist and there is unintentional bias or there is white privilege, then white people the system should be designed to benefit white people, and that should be measurable.
Correct.
Right? And the ultimate measure is poverty rates.
Right.
If there is white privilege, then whites should be advancing out of poverty at a faster, and blacks should be going into more poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But let's look at the US Census data. Okay. So 1959 is when they really started tracking the data. And in 1959, black poverty rate was at 55%. So more than half of the country of the black population was in poverty. The white population was about 18.8%. 9 years later, black poverty fell 20%. So in 1968, with the passage of the Fair Housing Act, the last major piece of civil rights legislation, black poverty was almost cut in half. So it went 55% to 34.7%. Now, let's make a note. That was with segregation before the civil rights laws were passed. And before there was any of these social safety net programs. So 20 points in 9 years. White poverty during the same period of time only fell 8%, 8.8% to 10%. So let's look at 1968 to 2018. 1968, the black poverty rate, 34.7%. In 2018, it was 20.7%. So it dropped about 14 points over that 50-year time span. White poverty increased by 0.1%. So if you go in the 60 years from 1959 to 2018, black poverty had dramatic improvement. If you were born white and poor in the United States between 1959 and 2018, You were
Hmm.
3.5 times more likely to remain poor in this country than a black child born at exactly the same time. So,
Right.
so by the numbers, systemic racism is impossible
Well,
because white
systemic.
privilege is impossible.
In order for I hate when people call systemic racism,
Mhm.
because systemic racism means that it's in the law.
Right. And they use the wrong term. There's no such thing as systemic racism. Racism is a person's attitude. Okay. So that
Well,
can't be
racism. I don't think race
racial
even
discrimination is in the law. This
race is
can't
not even skin color. That's the thing.
it well it,
Historic
yeah.
Historically, race wasn't about skin color. Race
Right.
was about your ethnicity. That's what race was historically about. Because if you look at the
Mm,
Jews and the Germans, they're both white.
right.
So when the Germans were killing the Jews, they were being racist towards the Jews, but they're the color the skin color are the same. So they were not going against the skin color. It was more of what the ethnicity and the background was. That's historically that's what racism started as.
Well in the
Then
18
it transitioned.
well in the 1850s, that was done by the United States medical community. In the
Yeah,
1850s, um, Americans at large were unsettled with the idea of slavery.
right.
And so during the quote unquote age of enlightenment, you know, powerful people, politicians, and people who had a stake in the slave industry commissioned studies. And these studies specific pointed to quote unquote evolutionary factors that prove that blacks were evolved to be slaves.
Yeah.
And so that's where it came from. If you look in, you know what the DSM is?
No.
The DSM, all the psychiatric illnesses in the country are cataloged in the DSM, right? So if
Hmm.
it's bipolar disorder, whatever you want to call it, it's cataloged in the DSM. So it says it describes the disease, its symptoms, how to diagnose it and test for it, and then and then any types of treatments for it.
Hmm.
There was a disease, you can look it up, it's hilarious. It's called drapetomania, and this was in the DSM.
Yeah.
And the slave community was so desperate to have the population believe that blacks were evolved to be slaves and that we're better off, that they
Yeah.
put a disease in the DSM, to that trying to escape slavery was a mental illness,
Right.
and the treatment was to quote beat the devil out of them as a proactive measure to stop blacks from wanting to escape. So why is that important? When someone has to create science that says such things, that means that they know it's not true, but they want to placate the general population and make them believe something.
Hmm.
So, kind of hopping back to the numbers on poverty, so there cannot be white privilege if every other racial group, Hispanic, Asian, over that 6 year time period has done significantly better than white Americans.
Hmm.
So the American system has not been designed since before the Civil Rights Act to favor whites. In fact, it has disfavored whites the
Right.
entire time. At least we know from the post World War II era. So that means that if there's no privilege, then it can't be systemic, because it's just apparently the system's not doing anything, right?
Right.
So why do we keep hanging on to this? Because it's a strong political narrative. You get a
It
group of
brings them votes.
Yep, you get a group of people, you separate them out, you tell them that they're oppressed, even though by the numbers they're doing better than the people that are accused of oppressing them. Now, what do I mean? Somebody can say, "No, Paul, that's not true. Blacks aren't doing better. They are not doing." How can I say this? If we look at, say, wealth, right? Whites have more wealth in their families, but the wealth gap doesn't mean that the country's racist. The wealth gap just indicates that we started from farther behind, and if we look at the gap, we can see the gap shrinking over time. So
Hmm.
in other words, it's self-correcting. The system is self-correcting. Other minorities are getting wealthier, and whites are not. Right?
Well, add in the influx of immigrants that come in here. and they get wealthy, because that also adds to the gap itself. So what I'm trying to say, like
Yep,
I myself, I'm an immigrant. I'm
yep,
from Iran,
yep,
and we face uh, prejudice in Iran all the time,
yeah,
because we grew up Catholic in a Muslim country.
yep,
So it wasn't racism; it's prejudice. That's why
right,
I look at it, right? So
yeah,
when I came to the States, I was a 13-year-old boy. Came to the States. I faced the same type of attitude,
right.
not from whites. It was mostly from Hispanics, because the
Oh,
area we lived, it was majority about 80-90% Hispanic people.
yeah,
So we face the same thing because I didn't speak English. So we're trying to fit in. We're trying to learn the language. And uh, I ended up, my brother and we ended up switching schools because after the first year, we just get into fights
hmm,
because we're not speaking English. We're just throwing punches at this point.
right,
But
yeah,
the school
yeah,
system we went to, it was like 90%, 92% Hispanic, and whites, blacks, and everybody else were the minorities in that school.
yeah,
That's just how it was, right? So, but still, I did not know what racism is or what racism was. We looked at it as prejudice that these people don't like us.
you're
Period.
right.
Right. So then we ended up going to like a almost all white people school.
Hmm.
A dramatic change. We were not fighting. We were actually, we were learning. We were making friends. We were talking to different people, trying to learn, the our way around, hustle and all that stuff. But high school wasn't where I truly saw prejudice
Hmm.
until I started my career in banking.
Okay, I didn't know you were a banker.
I worked in the financial industry for 7.5 years,
Hmm.
and I worked at Wells Fargo Bank for 5 of those years at an area in California called Pacific Palisades. Very rich area,
Hmm.
very rich, and you won't believe how much prejudice people live in that area. Mostly Hollywood people that live in that area. But holy crap, you want to see you want them to feel what racism means or what prejudice means, go to that area.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I
So
oh, go on. I'm sorry.
but then again, the way I looked at it was I didn't look at it as racism, as I looked at it as ignorance. I looked at it prejudice. So prejudice lives everywhere, right? I think what happens now, what's happening now, specifically with the black community, because I used to look at Compton, I used to look at Inglewood, predominantly black neighborhoods, and the older I got, the more stories I read,
Hmm.
it seems that they built the system to keep them in that position, because then I see generations of people staying on welfare, generation of people just staying on the government subsidies. They don't want to get out of that, free money. They don't want to get out of that environment. That's the environment they built. Because if you see uh, how little actually get out of that system, the percentage is very low.
Let me challenge one. Let me make one comment. I want to challenge your thinking on that. I agree. Prejudice is this is the way I see it. Prejudice has one of two roots. Either it's based on stereotyping
Hmm.
or racism.
Correct.
But that 99% of the time, it's stereotyping
Correct.
because the people don't hate the other race. They simply they have preconceptions about another race or group or ethnic group, and they react to that. But it's not hatred, and these people don't wake up trying to keep people down.
And I agree with you.
Yeah,
And
there's
if I
something
could,
wrong with that. That's what I'm going to say there. But we all have stereotypes to one degree or another. It's just that some
sure.
are more accepted than the others. The other thing that I want to challenge is I don't believe that people that stay on welfare historically want to stay on welfare historically. And this is why I'm going to say it. The welfare state was built on the idea of giving money to people in communities that have an economic downturn.
Yes.
Now, before the 1960s, what happened to communities that had an economic downturn? The people picked up and moved to where the jobs were.
Correct.
After the 1960s, the government enabled people to stay poor in place.
Hmm.
The industry leaves, the government gives you money, and so you can remain in your home. And the theory was is that I'm going to help you out till you get back on your feet. But the reality of it is that in the absence of jobs returning, you cannot get back on your feet. So
Correct.
in 1972, we had to change our immigration law, and we had to change our trade policy towards globalism. Now, this is the thing. If you look at every community where immigrants and blacks were the wealthiest, those are the same exact communities where immigrants and blacks are the poorest today. So if we go pre-1960s, it was the center of our wealth. You
Hmm.
flip it over to today, they are the epicenters of poverty. You have to ask yourself the question why. What happened? What happened was the government paid people when the manufacturing jobs went away and those complementary industries that went around it, they paid them to stay in place. Manufacturing left West Baltimore. The government gave people checks to stay there. Those jobs never returned. It's been 50 years and they're not going to return. Same thing with the poorest places in white America. Look at Appalachia. The coal
Hmm.
mines closed down a generation ago. So why are they there? Why are the poorest white Americans still in Appalachia? Because the government gives them money not to move.
Right.
And
The system.
the system. So what I'm saying is that I'm trying to get people to step back and say it. How can I say Democrat policies may sound compassionate, but a lot of them in the end are rather idiotic. Because of course, if you pay someone to stay where they are, they're going to stay where they are. Of course, they're going to wait for jobs to return, but in reality, those jobs are not returning. And so you've created not systemic racism, but you created systemic poverty
Hmm.
because you're paying people to stay poor in place. It's a policy problem. And Americans fall for the compassion argument when what should really happen is you should pay people to get retrained and then relocate them to where the jobs are that they were trained for. The other thing is when it comes to family stability, marriages are an economic dependency as much as it's more of an economic relationship and less of a Disney princess relationship. People get married, they have separate roles in their marriage, they have financial interests together, and in most marriages, men are the primary providers because women have to stop and have children and cannot always put in the overtime, can't always put in the same resource, but it's a partnership between the man and the woman to get to keep the family together and to take care of and raise the children.
Right.
Take away the economic dependency, pass checks into a family, then the man is no longer necessary. And
Correct.
so he's not necessary. And so he's disrespected. He goes his own way. And then the women in the community say, I don't really need a man. I can do better. I can do this without them. And so
Hmm.
and so that destroys the family. And I think we need to understand that we need to that's what causes the fatherless homes, and that's what causes the systemic poverty, and all of it is based on faulty Democrat policies made law 50 years ago.
Right. And I believe, and again, I believe it's by design. And this is what I said, like you have generations of people staying on the same system, is when they promote that, hey, if you don't have a breadwinner in the house, aka husband,
Mhm.
and you are a single mom with a child, here are the benefits you will receive. You will get healthcare, you will get subsidies, you will get X, Y, and Z, you get food stamps, blah blah blah, and you don't have to do anything. Just raise your kid, you know,
Yep.
as best as you can.
Well, it makes you depend on the government in order. It made the community dependent on the government for survival.
Correct. And what happens is you're not going to end up in like the best neighborhoods because of these subsidies. You're not gonna they're not gonna give you uh, an allowance to be able to rent a house or rent an apartment in like the best area of the town. You end up in the projects.
So let me challenge another viewpoint that you have. Okay, think about this. When these policies were put in place, poverty among minorities was greater. It's reduced.
Yes.
So when we say, and just speaking for Black statistics, when we talk about poverty in the Black community, what we have to realize is that um, 80% of Blacks aren't poor. But
No.
we but the Democrats talk in the media promotes that we are a majority poor community.
Correct.
The majority of Latinos and Hispanics are not poor. The majority of legal immigrants are not poor. Okay, so
Yeah.
so when we make that statement, when we stand up, we talk about how the government is keeping blacks down.
Hmm.
That's actually not true. Under the Trump administration, during the first 2 years of the Trump administration before COVID, white and black poverty fell another 5.2%, so that the black poverty in the second year of the Trump administration was lower than white poverty even from the 1950s.
Yeah.
So black poverty was around 17.5%,
Yeah.
right? So a generation had passed and it was correct, and it did these precipitous falls. What does
Hmm.
that tell you? That the system itself over time would be self-correcting. But it seems
Right.
that when a population gets to about 10% of poverty, the numbers stabilize.
Yeah.
So we're not going to get 100% poverty elimination unless we do something extremely radical in the country. However, black poverty would have continued to fall and probably will continue to fall once we get past this time period to about 10%. Asian Asian poverty dropped to 10% and has stayed there around 10%, between
Yeah.
10 to 7%. White is between 10 to 7% right now. And I think that all the races, is going to normalize at a 10 to 7% poverty rate for all races.
Well, the thing is, Paul, nobody knows what poverty actually means in dollars. Do
What do
you
you
know what I
mean?
mean? Like there's no so when they say people are in poverty, or like, when I see the media talking about the wealth gap,
Yeah.
when I see the media talking about uh systemic racism, the oppression, these people talking about we need to do reparation, all this
Mhm.
stuff. And when I start looking at the same people who are screaming and yelling, they're holding an iPhone in their hand, a
Right.
$900 iPhone. They're wearing $200-300 sneakers. They're wearing, $400-500, purses, bags, whatever. And they're the one that they're screaming, "Oh, I'm poor. I don't have anything. I don't own anything," and all this stuff.
There-
It makes me think a little bit,
well, this
because
is, mhm,
when
I'm
I
sorry.
when I when I came to this country, I didn't have any money. My parents didn't have any money. We literally have no money. We had a little to be able to rent an apartment after 3 months of living in my uncle's house.
Mhm.
you know and my mom started to work. She worked for 3 years, then my dad went to work, then I started working at age
Mhm.
17. My brother started to work, so we all started to pull our weight. We all started
Mhm.
working. But as much as in the schools we saw Nike Airs, Nike Jordans, we saw kids having cell phones, not cell phones, sorry, cell phones hadn't come out yet when I
I know
was
what you
there.
mean.
Like
And all kinds of
yeah,
electronic
like
stuff. Yeah.
Game Boys, a little electronic Game Boys, Sega and Nintendos and all the stuff, but we never had any of those, right? Growing up, I never had any of those, and gave us a perspective of like, what life is about, and get to learn things. But now I look at it is that the system that we are in currently shifted from teaching children as they were going to school. They stopped teaching them craft. They start teaching them how to be open-minded. They stopped teaching them how to be creative. They stopped teaching them how to be self-efficient, or anything that will help you outside of high school.
Right.
Anything.
Right.
Right. Anything.
No, I agree. I, can I interrupt? I mean, there, and when I say it, it'll make sense to you. There's the definition of poverty that most people believe. Most people, when they look at poverty, they look at the government poverty number, not realizing that the government definition of poverty is a number they put out there just so that they have a baseline for government benefits.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's actual poverty, because um, in the middle of Loudoun County, $50,000 is poverty,
Right.
whereas in someplace in Iowa, $50,000 is upper middle class. So it's not the same. I wrote a paper for the State Department back in 2007, and it was a postulate of the paper was called Primal Economics, right?
Mhm.
And it's based on the principles that you can understand poverty only when you eliminate money. And what do I mean by that? You have corn, I have beans.
Mhm.
You want corn, I want beans. We
Right.
negotiate and we trade corn and beans. Now, we didn't actually trade corn and beans. What we traded was the material we're delivering and our labor to produce it,
Right.
our work. So you gave me some of your work and I gave you some of my work, and we made a judgment as to how they're equal. So when your
Correct.
family came over, you may not have had any money, didn't make you poor, because what poverty is the lack of ability and resource to take care of your own needs. That's
Sure.
what poverty is. If you can do that, no matter how much that takes or how little that takes, you are not poor, because you are by your own efforts self-sufficient. The problem with giving money to people is money, it was created to make it easier to exchange your work. So now, rather than you giving me carting corn over to me or beans over to me, there's money, and
Yeah.
money allows us to exchange it. But money, real money, is not just currency. The value of money is the labor that creates the transfer of money.
Right.
And that's all it is a double. So if I give you $1, I've given you $1 of my labor because I worked to earn it and you didn't, which
Mhm.
means that that person is not, the symptoms of poverty have been relieved by giving someone money, but they're still poor no matter how much money you give them. Quite frankly, your children are poor. They have no money or the
True.
ability to earn the money. They
True.
are poor and homeless, living in your house. And during that time, you try to train them up so that they, by their own effort and labor, can go out and take care of themselves. So your job as a parent is you're teaching your children how not to be poor. And that's the difference. Our government looks at poverty statistics as a household income being a certain amount. And that's not true. And that's why you can see cell phones and apples and sneakers and all that stuff that's there, because somebody can give someone money and they can buy goods and services. And on paper, because X number of dollars went to the household, the government now says that they're not really poor, but because they're not creating it through their own effort, they're
Yeah.
still poor. And we have to remember that we can never buy our way out of poverty. The
No,
only
you can't, and you
way,
can't expect anybody giving you enough money to buy you out of the poverty. You have to get yourself out. It's like being in a swamp.
yeah.
You're
And
stuck in a
so,
swamp. You need to be able to get yourself out. Find a branch, find a floating log, something to save yourself out of that swamp. And that's exactly my point. My point is, my brother and I, we came here. We did not speak a word of English. We 13, 14-year old, my parents didn't speak a word of English. um but we found our way around. We had to survive, we had to thrive at the same
right.
time.
You had
So
no money, but you weren't poor
we
because you
were,
had
I
the
mean,
ability to work.
I you know we did not need the money.
Right. Well, I'm
my
saying
as,
you weren't
my
poor.
brother and I, we did not need the money, because when we got home, food was there,
Yep.
right? The
Mhm.
house was there, the food was there. Until it got to a certain point that we wanted a bigger place,
Yeah.
right? So I always say this to people. I say this many times over and over and over again. I tell everybody I'm not privileged. I create privileges for myself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So my kids are not privileged. I create the privileges for them.
Yeah.
I give it to them. It's me who gives that privilege. I did not come from privilege. I Nobody comes from privilege. It's privilege is created for that person who actually works for it and does it. So if you see a guy driving a Ferrari, you be damn well to talk smack to him because he did something that he was able to make that happen to buy himself a Ferrari. Period.
Yeah.
I am not mad at him for I'll tell you like Jeff Bezos, uh, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, all these millionaires and billionaires, right?
Hmm.
I can't be mad at them. They made a decision. They started something. They're smarter. They figured something out to make their billions,
Yeah. They learned
right?
how to do it and they did it.
I don't have to like their politics,
Right.
but the fact that they were able to create something out of, let's say, their garage, out of their apartment, out of their car, whatever it was, just an idea that got them there. I can't be upset at that person because they made billions because of the idea that they had or because of the product they started selling, and they made it. Good for them. This is what the system here allows you to do. It did not stop them from succeeding in life. And that's and this is what I see where we are going wrong in the school system a lot, is basically telling everybody you're worth nothing because of racism.
Yeah.
You're worth nothing because you are oppressed, my friend. You are worth nothing because of the color of your skin.
Well, I think they flipped the script. They've told white men that they're worth nothing because they
Right.
quote
Now
privilege.
now it's going both ways because now you're telling the white guy
Yeah.
you are worth nothing because
You're just born that way.
500 years ago something happened,
Yeah.
right? And now the black kid is like you're worth nothing because you're oppressed because of the white kid who sits next to you. So
Yeah.
you're automatically screwed. Whether
Yeah.
you like it or not, they're screwing you left and right.
Well,
And
oh, go on. I'm sorry.
yeah, and I think that's the falsehood that the it's going on, and what hits home for me
Hmm.
is because my kids are in school. I
Hmm.
have four kids,
Hmm.
and they're gonna be exposed to this kind of garbage. And what we tell them at home, we tell them everyone's equal, everyone has a way of succeeding. You will face one day that someone's gonna be better than you.
Right.
Always expect that someone is better than you. You are not above anybody. So you live your life the way we live our lives. Basically, everyone's equal. Our blood is the same color. You cut anybody's finger, we all bleed the same color. No one's different. We all gonna have different hair colors. We all gonna have different eye colors. We all gonna dress differently, but internally we all same. We all bleed the same color. And what I tell them is if you want to thrive, you have to challenge yourself. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations to face your fears and get over that fear to get ahead, because sometimes it's the fear that doesn't allow you to thrive. Sometimes it's the fear of what other people are going to say or what other people are how they're going to judge you, and which is going to stop you from thriving. And unfortunately the school system doesn't do that. The school system kills the kids enthusiasm, it kills their motivation, it kills their attitude with this crap that they continuously talk about,
Well,
you
God,
know
I think the biggest one of the biggest things the school district does wrong is our system of education is telling people that getting the education is what makes them valuable as people.
right.
They're promoting themselves. So they're basically telling our children that they're attacking our children's self-esteem
Yeah.
and telling them that the only way they have real esteem is to pass through their system. And the problem is that you're born into the world and you don't know who you are or what you can do. You discover who you are not by what you think about yourself, but by the life you lead and what you do. I've taught my kids, when you're in a classroom, it's not about the A, B, or C, or D. It's about, you don't know what you can do unless you apply yourself and try it. And if you apply yourself and you get a C, that's fine. You know that that's not something that you're good at. If you apply yourself and you get an A, you know that you can do it. And with each of these steps, by your actions, you give yourself further definition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the true basis of self-esteem. You go out, you try, you get knocked down, you figure it out, and you move through life. And at the end of your life, you'll know who you are by the life that you've led.
Yeah.
These days, our kids are being taught, identity politics, and all these issues with self-esteem, is our kids are being taught to think about themselves all the time and to try to define themselves in thought,
Mm-hmm.
disconnected from what they do.
Correct.
And if they want our children to believe that they are special in everything, even when they haven't done anything to earn it.
Correct.
And they don't realize that's why these kids are so insecure.
Participation trophies.
Yeah, they're not given the ability to accomplish anything.
Yeah.
When you start cutting back on the classes and the advanced classes, you're putting a position where that child that could have gotten that advanced credential will no longer be able to discover the limits of what they're capable of. You're just taking it away from them.
Yeah. And the other day my two oldest sons got into an argument.
How old are they?
10 and 9. Right? And in reality, they're best friends, but
Yeah.
they're gonna get into an argument anyways because they're very they're not that far apart in age.
Yeah.
So my oldest, he doesn't run well. Like, he doesn't know how to run. His coordination is all off. But my second son, he's a fast runner, really fast, right? And they were arguing over a lollipop. So my second son got to this lollipop faster than my older son. And my oldest son got upset, and he's like, he's always going to be faster than me. I'm never going to be as fast as him. I said, that's not true. I said, that's not true. I said, do you know why he's fast? He's like, I don't know why. I was like, because he runs literally everywhere. If he needs to go to the bathroom, he's running to the bathroom. If he needs to go to his room, he's running to the room. If he needs to come to the dinner table, he's running to the dinner table. In retrospect, he's practicing constantly because he runs all the time. And I tell him, I said, look, we went riding our bicycles the other day. He dumped his bicycle so he could just run. He doesn't like riding, he likes running. So he's like, well, that's why he's always fast. I was like, yeah, he's practicing. I said, if you start doing the same thing, you're going to be as fast as him, maybe even faster. I said, stop putting the I can't mindset in your head. Once you say I can't, you're done. You already made up your mind that you say I can't and you're done, right? I say, from going forward, instead of saying I can't, start saying how can I?
Yeah.
How can I? Don't say I can't, say how can I? That way, you're leaving yourself some room to think of a strategy or a way to figure out how to be faster than him. Right. Instead of saying, I just can't do it. And that's it. You just killed everything you wanted to do. You're not even going to think of an idea to be faster. And like, I'm the same way. I from time to time, I tell myself I can't, but majority of the time, my wife, God bless her, I swear, like she puts up with me so much because I'm constantly building something, I'm constantly making something, I'm constantly thinking of something to build. I've had few things that I've built that which I was successful in, and I sell them, and it generates a very, very tiny amount of money just to fund my habits, right?
Mhm.
But the idea was that I never told myself I can't. So I weld, I do carpentry, I work on cars, I work on anything you put in front of me. I, and and I tell my kids, I said, do you guys see how I just build things constantly? They're like, yeah, you're always building something. Even probably in your sleep, you're building something. I say, you're right. I dream of building something sometimes. I say, and I want you guys to think the same way. Don't say I can't, say how can I? And I think that type of mindset should be in the schools. I
Yeah,
think that type of mindset should be applied to these children to be challenged. And when this was, I believe, like 2 years ago, they were planning to take out the advanced classes in our school district, and that was basically advanced math. I think it was they were
yeah,
trying to take
yeah,
out
yeah.
calculus. It was calculus they were trying to take out of high school. Basically, anybody that wants to go to calculus had to now take it in private classes. So
Right.
if when they apply to colleges, they need to show that they took calculus so they can actually get into better colleges. And that by itself, it's undermining the children.
Yeah,
That
it's
by itself creates the division that they want, because now the kid who has parents that can actually afford to put that child in private school to take calculus is going to separate him from the kid who doesn't have money, or parents don't have money to be able to put him in the calculus schools or classes. So do you see how
yeah,
that how
absolutely,
creates that division, right? It creates a
absolutely.
division. And
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 how many
this
kids
is
do you have?
I got four.
You have four total.
Yeah.
How's oldest and youngest? How old are they?
10, 9, 4, and 3.
Okay. Are the
Yeah.
other ones girls?
The last one is a girl.
Oh, God bless her. Her brothers are going to make her life a living
Oh,
nightmare.
she already controls everybody. She already figured it out. She already figured
Awesome.
it out.
Awesome.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Realistically speaking, I think by dumbing down the school system, it doesn't help the next generation coming out. It
No,
destroys the next generation. And unfortunately, this is how the government system functions, because they want people that they can manipulate easily. Anybody that could be manipulated easily is easily controlled. They can control them, they can shape their mind. We already saw it in 2016 election. We already saw it in 2020 election. We already see it in midterm elections. We already see it during the riots. We see it during the protests. We see it through the media. We see all the propaganda that's being pushed amongst people, right? And what happens is a lot of people, they buy into it, whether they like it or not.
yeah, I mean, most people want to be have a natural affinity towards being led. I used to do a thing, and I hope it never gets up. Whenever I wanted to get a decision made in my favor as a
Hmm.
consultant, I would call the most people possible into a single meeting,
Yeah.
and then I would make a statement of what we should do as as a statement. We need to do blah 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 blah, and then I would say, does everyone understand what I'm trying to say? And they would say yes. I would say, does it make sense? And they would say yes. And I would say, so does anybody have any objections to doing that? If there were three people in the room, people would speak up. If there were 20 people in the room, nobody spoke up. And the decision would carry. And it was such that a month later, someone that was in that meeting who actually signed off on the decision would say, well, who made that decision? And I would look in the mud and say, it was you. And they would look confused.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they weren't bad decisions. It was in the technical field. But it was just, if you get a bunch of people in a room, they act differently.
Yeah, because they don't want to stand out.
Yeah. An individual's smart. Crowds are dumb.
It's true. It's true, because people don't want to stand out. They don't want to face criticism. They don't want to and this is what happening, like the cancel culture. This is
Mhm.
why people don't speak up, because they're like, oh, what if I get fired from my job? What if I get, I get, my life gets destroyed. People will, blast my name all over the place. Like we see it all the time.
Mhm.
And and you know, and I tell people, I said, listen, if that's the mentality you go by, that you don't want to lose your job,
Mhm.
or you don't want to speak up because you don't want to be ousted, then don't complain.
Right.
Don't complain. Period. So, it becomes pointless, because now you have people who scream, yell, burn, loot, nothing happens to them.
Yep. Exactly. Nothing happens to them. The crowd
Nothing happens to
mentality.
them. The quiet ones who speak out once, they get screwed. If they speak against what's happening, they get screwed. And
And that's why it continues to happen. You have to get to a point where you speak up, and that's just and you have to be able you have to be willing to take whatever consequences that are going to come out. I mean,
I mean, it's from, like, I tell people that I didn't do this because I wanted fame or anything. I said I did this because of my kids. My
yeah,
kids are the next generation. I came from a country who persecuted people for being a certain religion. And I've seen things I wish nobody should see or ever see in their life. I've
yeah,
seen really, really bad things.
yeah. I actually was on a development team, and just coincidentally, about four people in that team were from Iran,
Hmm.
that were Christians from Iran,
Yeah.
and there was a couple that weren't Christians, but um, they had kind of been raised under the Shah, the way the
Hmm.
Shah did things, and the stories I was told were just bizarre. Like one of the project managers, I won't give her name, but she was here. She was saying they were on a beach. It was four guys, four girls, and even though they broke no law, it broke some Islamic law, I guess.
Yeah.
And the police pulled up and beat the men
Hmm.
and then arrested them and
Hmm.
accused them of a crime. And there was absolutely nothing they could do about it.
Yeah. It's normal.
And she was saying that this was a beach that they had gone to every week during the summer for 10 years.
Hmm.
And the changes came, and she, she had to get out. It was, she said she didn't even recognize her own country.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's very true. It's
Oh
very
yeah,
true.
and it was just another one. This is crazy. Another one. The guy had met a Muslim woman, and when they went to get together, she wanted to convert to Catholicism,
Hmm.
and before they could leave the country, her family killed her.
Yeah. Honor killing.
And I'm just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, right now it's changed a lot. It's not as bad as it was during the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and
It
yeah, they
cha-
came here during the 80s and 90s.
yeah, yeah, it's changed a lot from that time period. And it was what happened was in early 2000s
Hmm.
was that's when the regime started to change its ideology a little bit. Like they started getting a little bit softer on the people, because now people were rioting, now people were getting
That makes sense. Yeah,
loud.
yeah,
Especially 2009 election in Iran got really riled up when they had almost 3 million people in the street, and they started to riot. They started to, like, they almost got to overthrow the government. And
right.
that's
So
when
you
they
kind of have to
realized that, like,
back
all right,
off.
we can't be doing this anymore. Like, we need to, there's still restrictions, but it's not as bad as what it used to be back in the 80s or the 90s.
Okay.
And the moral of the story is that a lot of immigrants that come to this country, they come from nothing
Hmm.
and they become something.
Hmm.
And that something doesn't mean that you are a millionaire. That something means that they were able to purchase a house, they were able to get a great job or a good job to make a living for themselves, be able to go to the grocery store and buy whatever the hell they want, buy a six pack, buy their groceries, come home, have a car to drive,
Hmm.
and live their life peacefully. That is the American dream.
Yeah. I
American
was
dream is to do that,
be self-sufficient.
to be self-sufficient.
I define wealth as the ability to live your life without having to think about money all the time, whatever that number is.
Absolutely,
You know, the
absolutely.
person to have enough money that if you walk into a store and you like something reasonably, I like that shirt. I can get that shirt. You buy it, you go, right?
Right.
Or you're not worried about running out of food by the next paycheck, et cetera, et cetera. So once you're not living from paycheck to paycheck, no matter what that number is for you, to me, you're wealthy because that means that your level of stress and worry becomes so low at that point, and
Yeah.
that is something that 99% of the people living on the planet never achieve.
Correct.
Most people on the planet do worry about food, do worry about housing. They worry about being too cold, too hot. They worry about all kinds of stuff. Once you get to the
Absolutely.
point where you are like, I got enough, we're good. You're
Yeah.
wealthy.
I mean, look. You don't have to have a castle. You don't have to have a Bentley under your feet to drive around. You don't need all that to be comfortable. You
Yeah,
don't need all that to say I made it in life.
yeah.
You know that's not what makes you, because you cannot take those to your grave. Once you die, you can't bury yourself in your own bed. I mean, you can if you want to, but
Have you ever heard of the book A Millionaire Next Door? The Millionaire
yes,
Next.
of course,
Yeah, where it
I
was
read it.
saying, oh, we're saying the average millionaire drives a 3-year-old Jeep Cherokee.
Right?
And there are more millionaires who are roofers than any other field. And I can
Yes,
see that because I'm not climbing on the roof.
yes, absolutely.
I know these
I
people live
hundred
normal lives.
percent I 100% believe that. I 100% believe that the plumbers, the electricians, the welders, the contractors, people who are actually willing to do the heavy lifting are the most successful people.
Yeah, absolutely.
On average, on average, they have a great home, they have great cars, they have their bank accounts full of money, they got work constantly, they hustle constantly, right? So it's all about mindset. It's all about how you want to pursue your life, or what do you see your life as. Like, some
Mhm.
people say, as you said, I'm done, I'm good where I am, I don't want any more, this is comfortable enough for me, and I'm done, I don't want to do anything anymore, this is my comfort zone.
Oh, just to give you an
So
update real quick, I just got heard back from Hung. I'm
mhm,
going to send you the contact information to his campaign manager
awesome.
and just tell him that Hung told me to set this up,
Okay,
and Hung's already agreed to do it.
awesome, perfect, thank
Okay,
you, Paul.
no problem.
uh we're about to hit the 1 hour mark. Paul, do you have anything to add to this conversation? I mean, I gotta bring you back, man, because I mean, 1 hour is not just it's just not enough for us
No,
to talk.
you know, I, my thinking is that there's so many things out there right now to keep us apart that when people are people, they come together. And let me give you just think about this.
Yeah.
At the end of the Civil War, right? Black poverty was about 100%. Now, even though up until 1959, it was pretty high, over that 100-year period of time, 45%, almost half of the poverty had been reduced, and then more than two-thirds had been reduced before we had the Civil Rights Acts and all these laws. Before the
Yeah.
law said that people were equal, progress was already being made. To me, that says that at the local level, person to person, that people were being people towards one another. People were trading, people had relationships, whether they were white, black, immigrant, native born, that
Hmm.
when people open up their hearts and open up the doors to one another and just have friendships, that civilization advances. But when we let the government
Dictate
determine
that.
what's good, what's bad, determine the message, determine the labels, put all the rules. We can't do this at a lunch counter. We can't sit here. We need safe spaces with puppy dogs for this. Whenever the powerful, the establishment get involved, they're what tears down society. Because absent of government, in the absence of Jim Crow, people advanced.
Yeah, but that's too dangerous for the government.
Right, because they want what preserves their power, which is why
Correct.
founding fathers never trusted them.
Exactly. And this is why they put the Constitution in place. This is why they put the three branches of government in place. This is why they put the Bill of Rights in place. So,
Yep.
you know, and that that the funny thing is, if you go ask an average American what is in the Constitution, they will not be able to
Yeah, most of them
give
don't.
you even one
So
one thing in the
I
Constitution.
want to end with this statement. I heard this. I thought this was brilliant. It says, today's problem is the downfall of America will result because of the conflict between the marginal majority and the marginal minority.
Hmm.
That the majority is only a majority by margin.
Yeah.
And so they think they have all the power. But you know what? If you have 51, 49% of the population is not going to obey 51% of the population. That's why we needed super majorities. That's why our government was designed the way it was designed. That's why there was a filibuster. It wanted to make sure that there was not a simple majority, but an overwhelming of majority voting for something. The electoral college is the same thing.
Yeah.
For college may not be electing the president, the American people
Yeah.
may elect the president, but the people elect the president. In other words, those votes are spread across the state so that America does the election and not individual groups of people, which means that America as a whole may want someone different than the majorities in New York, California, and Chicago.
That's why I've been calling for electoral style voting within states.
Yeah, because it preserves marginal democracies are destructive.
Right.
If we have three guys in a room, right? And the two of you say, Paul, we elect you to jump off the bridge.
Right.
Am I going to jump off the bridge?
No.
I'm like, you're kidding me. Now, if there were 100 guys in the room,
Right.
and they said, Paul, you're jumping off the bridge, we'd be like, okay, I'm jumping off the bridge.
Yeah.
And
Exactly. No, I totally understand, man. I
so we
totally
just
understand. I mean, it's
a fight.
it's a fight, and I hate the fact that there's so much division going on. I hate the fact that there's so many people at each other's throat because of you know uh what their politics is or what people's ideology is. And friendship is gone down the drains, man. Like, friendships are gone. Nobody cares about friendship anymore. All they care about is, oh, what political
Yeah.
party do you affiliate with? What's your stance on this and what's your stance on that? So
I used to have a ball for my mother's birthday, and this is the crazy story. Literally, I got this house that was it was an older Victorian, 16-foot ceilings, and just once a year, I would just say everyone gets a gown. I took my daughters out, I bought them gowns and hair, and they did makeup, and the idea was just this once a year, come together. We're gonna dress in tuxedos. Invite her friends, my friends, family, and this got all over the town. That people tried to asked for invitations.
That's funny
because they're like, nobody has dinner parties like this anymore.
Yeah,
like it doesn't exist. They're like, this is just they just want to come and dress up. They're like, we'll pay.
Yeah, I mean, hey, why not? There you go. You just started another revenue of income, man. Well, Paul, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate taking the time to talk to me and talk to the audience and give us your knowledge. And I would love to have you back on the show again.
Well, I'd like to hang out outside the show as well.
Yes, absolutely. We're local, so we can actually do that.
Yeah, we can do that.
That definitely is a thing. And I believe since you've been around longer than I have, I would definitely value your knowledge and information that coming from this country and how you lived your life and from all the experiences that you had in the military, college, growing up in different states that you lived in. I think it's invaluable, man. Like it actually adds to someone's appreciation of this country and how the country actually was built, where we came from, where we are now.
So I
So
just sent you the information for Hung,
awesome. Did you
and
text it to me or did
I
you?
just texted it to you.
Awesome, perfect,
Okay.
perfect. Thank you, Paul. Thank you,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for coming in. With that, have a great night. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and push the like button. Peace out.
Take care.